Hello everyone, my name is Mike, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're continuing Sabaton week by having a look at Inmate 4859. So here we are, Inmate 4859. From the inset of this, I'm not too sure. I presume, given that the prisoner code, this must either be a story about a prisoner of war or about somebody detained within one of the various concentration camps that the Nazi Germany used. Or presumably Nazi Germany might also be some of the Japanese concentration camps as well. But other than that, I don't know. I have been looking for a lyric video on the Sabaton channel, but I couldn't find that, so I'm just using the official one, and I have the lyrics up on a different tab, which as I go through the first verse and chorus, I'll then just pull up and just read through to try and pull out any information that I can from there. But otherwise, same practice. The link to the video will be in the description below. Please go and check them out, give them a like and all that good stuff. And without further ado, let's get into this. Okay, so just giving that a quick pause there, so just having a look at the lyrics. So it says, "A dawn of the century, a boy born by a lake, resettled from Karelia's plains, go to a man in exile as the Great War came, unleashed a shadow on his world. Witold, Witold, who knows his name, inmate in hell or hero in prison, soldier in Auschwitz, who knows his name, locked in a cell, waging war from the prison, hiding in Auschwitz, who hides behind 4859. So that certainly answered my questions at the very beginning of this story, of this video rather, over whether it was a POW, whether it was a concentration camp, and whether it was, you know, in the Pacific theatre or in European theatre. Obviously, if it's inside Auschwitz, it's very clear of where he is, at the very least. Of course, Auschwitz being one of a number of death camps, probably the two most notable being Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka, where you know, millions of people were sent to their deaths in a number of different ways, whether that be for Zyklon B or carbon monoxide gas, essentially. But yeah, so I have a very, very thin level of knowledge about this individual because I actually covered this as part of a university project when I was doing my degree some years ago now, about kind of the untold stories or the heroes of the Holocaust, if you will. We had to build a project around individuals who were a part of the Holocaust, whether they were inside the camps or whether, or they was working as part of the resistance, who tried to, you know, fight back to an extent, or had some heroic stories of things that they'd done, or charity, mercy inside the prisons, inside the camps, or those that actively tried to undermine them and do this, because the whole idea was that when you think of the Holocaust, you practically only think of the people inside those camps as victims, and they were helpless to their fate and stuff like that. And I don't want to have that coming across as rude or anything like that, but the whole idea of it was to try and find the individuals that, despite being in this terrible circumstance, tried their all to do something, whether that was to improve the lives of their fellow prisoners, their fellow victims, or in the case of resistance fighters, try to undermine and free as many people as they could have. For my version, my individual that I picked out and researched heavily was Maximilian Kolbe. Now, Saint Maximilian Kolbe, as he's been made a saint posthumously. And just a quick brief kind of thing on him was he was a Pole, and he was a Polish priest. And when the Germans invaded Poland, he stayed behind at the monastery, and he helped set up a temporary hospital going, and he actively denied the opportunity to sign a waiver, which basically meant that he would be offered full protection and rights as a German citizen, but it meant kind of adopting German as his ethnicity and not being a Pole. And he refused to do that. He had that opportunity and he refused. And all the while he kept trying to kind of set up a monastery set up a kind of refugee camp and give shelter to various refugees from all around Poland, including thousands of Jews. And eventually the Gestapo caught up to him, and him, along with a handful of others, were arrested and sent to Auschwitz. And it was from in there that he still kept up his kind of priestly duties. He still tried to give comfort, tried to give some semblance of kind of religious practice and mass, much to the disdain of the various other prison guards in there, he was severely beat a number of times, lashed. On one occasion, the prisoners within Auschwitz had to smuggle him to the prison hospital in order for him to get treatment. And eventually, one of the inmates of the concentration camp within Auschwitz escaped, and as a result, the camp commissar said that because he had escaped, 10 people were to be locked in a bunker until they starved to death. They picked 10 people at random, and the person who was picked at random cried out, "My wife, my children." And in that moment, Maximilian Kolbe stepped forward himself, and he asked the commissar if he could go in the place of that man. The commissar agreed, and so the 10 men, including Maximilian Kolbe, were sent into a bunker underground, where they were, they had no food, they had no water, and they were left down there for days. But all the while, as all the numerous reports say, that Maximilian Kolbe all the while helped try and calm the other 9 men that were with him, try and keep them steady, led them in prayers and stuff like that to try and give them a hope, some absolution and stuff like that in their own minds. And eventually, after I think it was 2 weeks or so, he was the only man left in the bunker alive. All the others had starved to death. And eventually the German prison guards, when they came down and opened that bunker, saw he was still alive and then gave him the lethal injection. But as I said, with going back to this video, Inmate 4859, as I said, the only thin knowledge that I know comes from hearing other people's projects, and I believe they were concluded. I can't remember his surname, and if that helps, I might jog some things. But what I seem to remember is that he volunteered to go into Auschwitz to basically gather intelligence, to gather evidence, to feed back to the Polish resistance and the Western Allies as a whole. Which, volunteering to go into Auschwitz is... well, I mean, it seems unimaginable to us, especially when we know what happened there. And I do know how his story ended. That's something that I do remember from those projects very vividly, but I don't want to go into that in case the song covers that. So without further ado, let's get back into it.
Outside of never came, decided to break free. In the end of April 43. Join the uprising, fight on the streets while hiding his rank. Takes command while serving his country in need. Whoa, no. Whoa.
just getting into the second verse now. Outside never came, decided to break free. The end of April 43. Joined the uprising. Fight on the streets while hiding his rank. Takes command, all for serving his country in need. Witold, who knows his name? Inmate in hell or hero in prison. Soldier in Auschwitz, who knows his name? Locked in a cell, waging war from the prison. Hiding in Auschwitz, who hides behind 4859. So, again, going from there, outside never came, decided to break free, so he managed to escape the camp or smuggled out somehow. And at the end of April 43, joined the uprising. Given that the Warsaw uprising is, the Warsaw ghetto uprising rather, is kind of in full swing kind of by early April. I imagine it's probably not this, so I assume when it says join the uprising, it was the Warsaw uprising 1944. As I said, I'm trying to link back in my mind from what that other person's project was to try and remember more information about this man. But yeah, so it seems like he was involved in the 1944 Warsaw uprising as well. So, I mean, an absolute hero who's doing his all to try and help as many people as he can. And I'm just looking from the lyrics here. We seem to be going into the last verse, so I'll just get to that before I get on to anything else. Okay. So yeah, that last verse went, sent to the prison where heroes are judged as traitors, accused of treason by his own, sentenced by countrymen under pressure of foreign influence, men he once fought to free, inmate in hell or hero in prison, soldier in Auschwitz, we know his name, locked in a cell waging war from the prison, hiding in Auschwitz, he hides behind 4859. And this is unfortunately the part of his story that I actually remember from that project, is that he survived the war and eventually, he survived the war and he was still kind of loyal to the government in exile in London, the real Polish government, if you will. And but as we know, after the Second World War, Poland became a kind of satellite state of the Soviet Union, the Polish communists. And he travelled back to Poland to gather information and things like that on the state of affairs, how things were in Poland. And in doing so, he was arrested by Soviet authorities, and they gave him a show trial, and he was found guilty and executed in, I think it was in the late 1940s. It wasn't into the 50s, so it was only a handful of years after the Second World War. That's what I can remember. And, it's such a tragic way, when you consider everything they went through. So he actively went into Auschwitz voluntarily to gather evidence, to gather information, to try and help people. And then he fought alongside his countrymen in the Warsaw Uprising. And then, after all of that, a handful of years after supposedly peace, he's effectively killed by his own countrymen under pressure from the Soviets, which yeah, there's not really words that you can say, to be honest, when you say that. I mean, I know, as I said, as I try and say, the whole idea and everything that I've been told is when you study the past, you're supposed to try and take away your kind of emotion and try and detach yourself from what you're reading, what you're experiencing. But I don't feel like you can really be human and hear of this story without feeling some degree of anger. And it also, again, before I do this as well, I just want to touch on the Holocaust as well. So everyone knows that 6 million people, everyone should know that 6 million Jewish people died as a result of the Holocaust, whether that be in the camps or whether that be through for other means as well. But the important thing that I want to kind of remember and remind people as well is that, as my clock goes off, is that when we think of 6 million, the death toll of the Holocaust as a whole is far more closer to 20 million. And that might still be a kind of low estimate of people, because we had the 6 million Jews, you had around a similar number of Soviet civilians, not including Jewish people, just Soviet civilians. You had Soviet prisoner of wars, you just had Polish people, Serbs, disabled people, homosexuals, various different Slavic people, Freemasons, Catholics, particularly in Poland, a lot of Catholics were sent to death, as well as in Germany, Night of the Long Knives as well. A lot of Catholic kind of clergymen, whether that be priests, nuns, or what they called politicized Catholicism, were also targets of that, as well as Republicans, political dissidents, and Jehovah's Witnesses were all sent. And that gives a kind of minimum estimate, when you consider all those things, of a minimum 20 million people were murdered. And that's just not within things like Treblinka and Auschwitz, but it's within the work camps as well, not just the death camps. It's within the kind of that inefficient ways that they found to kill people, which was like roving death squads just driving around shooting people, the mobile gas chambers in buses and stuff like this. And the reason why I want to say this is, because we need to remember that, again, these were people. And more importantly, for this song particularly as well, we had, I just want to get his name again, Witold. We had this man Witold, who outwardly went into these things deliberately. Knowing, as I said, 20 million people found their ends as a cause of the Holocaust, and yet he went into it willingly to try and do something about it. And that's why he needs to be remembered. That's why he deserves to be remembered. And that's why, again, I am going to check out Sabaton history video on this man, because I want to learn more about him. As I said, I only have a vague memory of this, and he's one of the people that truly deserves to have some sort of memorial or memory to him in public consensus. So I'm going to check them out. Hopefully you will come along and learn with me about this extraordinary man as well. If anybody wants more information about Maximilian Kolbe as well, the example that I used, then please let me know in the comments and I'll try and provide what I can. So if you want to learn more about his story, or if I can find a video about him and his life, that would include as well, because he is equally as impressive, just in a different way. But other than that, I thank you ever so much for watching. Apologies if this was a bit of a morbid one and my voice was a bit kind of lower or quieter than usual. I'm a bit under the weather at the moment, but nothing too serious. But regardless, I still thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.